many years, but particularly in the last year. And people say, well, why are you so bothered about Israel? And I hear that from the right. The left don't care, they know I'm beyond the saving. But on the right, I hear that. And I think they don't realize, they think it's some weird thing. Like, what is this small state? Why does it bother you? I don't think they've even remotely reflected on what I regard as the deepest reasons to care. It seems to me, if, as you well know, Western civilization is based on the legacy of Athens and Jerusalem.
Well. Now, I'm generally a big fan of Douglas Murray. I think he does good work. I think he's clearly very intelligent, very well-spoken, very meticulous in his research, and he's relentless. You know, he's written a lot of books, in particular on the damage that mass migration is doing to Europe and to Western civilization. And, you know, I applaud him for all that, and he's been doing this for many, many years. So he's indefatigable. But I have noticed since the start of the war between Israel and Palestine, that he's just been everywhere and a huge supporter of Israel. And I've seen several interviews where he says just what he said now, that somehow, you know, that Israel is the one of the underpinnings of Western civilization. And no, sorry, I 100% disagree with that. Western civilization is based, I guess, on 3 key pillars. And if you take any of those away, you don't have Western civilization. The first one is Christianity, which, yes, comes from that part of the world where current day Israel is, but has nothing to do with Israel or with Judaism. So the Christianity, you know, the European nations were converted to Christianity. The European nations themselves, that's the second pillar. And when I say nations, I mean the ethnic groups, the European peoples, the different peoples of Europe. You know, all the different European ethnic groups that make up Europe. And the third thing is the legacy, as Douglas Murray said, the legacy of Athens, the Greco-Roman philosophical and legal or juridical legacy. That's what makes up Western civilization. Those are the 3 key underpinnings. You take away any of those pillars and you don't have Western civilization anymore. So his whole focus on Israel, I mean, fine, if he's a big fan of Israel, that's great. I'm sure there are reasons to support it, but he makes it seem like, you know, if Israel falls, which doesn't look like it's really in any danger of doing, but he makes it seem like if Israel falls, then somehow Western civilization will fall. I've heard him say that on several interviews, and to me, it makes absolutely zero sense. You know, let me know what you think in the comments about that, but I'm just not seeing it.
Puzzling about the foreign policy scene is the differential treatment by the left of, say, Israel and Ukraine. That's been a bit of a conundrum, and same thing on parts of the right, but in reverse. So, you know, the Ukraine conflict has sort of upended a bunch of traditional, I'd say, cross-cutting political alignments. If you had told me 20 years ago that Republicans, in large part, would be very much against the funding of Ukraine in its existential war against Russia, I would have thought that was pretty nuts. I mean, I'm old enough to remember in 2012 when Mitt Romney was supposedly speaking on behalf of the foreign policy of the 1980s and being anti-Russian. Right. Now it's the entire left that has declared that Russia is the great scourge state, which it is in part. And meanwhile, you have large swaths of the right claiming that Ukraine is somehow too corrupt to be supported, that Russia's going to win anyway, that the best thing that the West can do is sort of pull back. Now, I've distinguished between 2 separate arguments. One is sort of a pragmatic argument about what sort of end state should be sought. Is it really worthwhile funding Ukraine to the tune of trying to take back Crimea or Donbass, where large swaths of the population actually still support Russia? But that's a different question from the sort of larger scale question that seems to be posed in parts of the right, which is, should we just get out of Ukraine entirely, the West, in terms of funding? The question I've always asked is, why would it be in America's interest or the West's interest for Russia to simply take Ukraine But where do you think that's coming from?
Well, what interest does the United States have in Ukraine, or in getting involved in the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia? Obviously, the United States is already involved. Clearly, we're supplying intelligence. It is a type of asymmetric war. Russia is not just fighting Ukraine. Russia is fighting the West and Ukraine, and the battlefield is Ukraine. It's not our problem. I've said this on many videos, and some of you viewers have not been happy with me. But as far as I'm concerned, not our problem. It really isn't our problem. Now, I understand there are reasons we're making it our problem, but I don't agree with those reasons. Just like I think Israel-Palestine, not our problem. Now, of course, Israel has enormous influence over the American government for reasons we know why, but doesn't mean I like it, and it doesn't mean I agree with it.
Well, some of it is the inevitable blowback of failed foreign policy of the 2000s. It's something that's very striking to me in Republican politics has been that at some point, you might say that John McCain was a kind of pivotal figure. At some point, the so-called adults in the room stopped being respected as adults. And, you can lament that. You can also say, well, to an extent, they brought it upon themselves. I remember I sort of got off that bandwagon by the time of Syria. Maybe people think that's a bit late, but I remember when I heard McCain and others saying, we know who to arm in Syria, I was thinking, I don't believe you anymore. I don't think you do. I think we're going to make a hideous mistake again. But by the way, the West got blamed for the breakdown of Syria despite not intervening, and we would have been blamed if we had intervened, because some people don't know who to blame unless it's us. I do think that, yes, I think there was a huge loss of institutional knowledge and generational self-belief, actually. I think it might be something like the post-Vietnam era in America. And of course, everything's so easy to understand in the rearview mirror. Everybody's an expert at that. But I would say that in relation to Ukraine, America, I understand the American isolationist trend, and I deplore it. Because in the case of Ukraine, I mean, if you go to the Baltic states, which are NATO members, they're really not bluffing when they say that they're worried that if Putin takes everything he wants in Ukraine, they're next. I was in Vilnius recently. It's so close. It's so close. These are our allies. If you want to ditch your allies, well, that's an idea. But
the NATO countries are our allies. Ukraine's not our ally. Yeah, see, there's always this. And of course, the allies, Poland is next to Ukraine. The Baltic states are right there next to Russia. But there's zero evidence, as far as I can see, let me know in the comments whether or not you agree with this, that there's zero evidence that Putin wants to reestablish the Soviet Union, despite what all the war hawks are saying. They claim he's gonna, this is a first step. It's like the domino theory during the Vietnam War. That was like America's whole thing. The foreign policy experts were saying, well, if Vietnam falls to communism, all these other countries, the neighboring countries will fall to communism, and then it will be like a domino effect, and communism will spread around the world. It's complete nonsense, of course. And I think it's the same idea here. It's just nonsense. They're trying to create momentum and support for ginning up a bigger war against Russia, as far as I can see. And I know it's in the interest of certain people to do that. That's very clear. The military-industrial complex and lots of other people, but it's not in the interest of the American people in general. No way, is it?
Come out and say it. The Central and Eastern Europeans really aren't bluffing. And it's even easier to see this as a far-off conflict in the US than it is in, say, Britain. So the Europeans are genuinely worried. Of course they should pay their way in NATO, of course. But they're not faking it. And there are some people now who pretend that Vladimir Putin only wants Ukraine. And among other reasons I know that's wrong was that I was in the country of Georgia after Vladimir Putin invaded it. And so I have enough muscle memory to remember countries that Vladimir Putin's invaded. There are a lot of people with no memory at all. But I think that's, broadly speaking, what people are thinking is, we've screwed up a lot. We don't believe anyone who says they know about foreign policy, and it's all just a mess, and the world's a mess. I find it an odd tendency on the American right in particular, because it always strikes me as being inherently contradictory. The American isolationists always want nothing to do with the rest of the world, yet they still want America to be the top dog. And if you said to the American isolationists, you can remove yourself from the world, absolutely, but you should know that it means in the 21st century, China or other countries, any number of other countries, will replace America as the world's dominant power. And if you are happy with that, argue it out. But that is the consequence. I mean, America may have got fat and lazy, but China is hungry as hell.
Well, I consider myself an isolationist, and yeah, I think American imperialism has absolutely run its course. It's now like a rabid dog running wild in the street, and it's got to be put down. It's completely destructive in many ways, destructive to the United States, it's destructive to the people of the United States. Much like free trade was promoted since the 80s as some great boon to American citizens. It basically means you can get cheap consumer goods. But in return for free trade, you offshore all of your production and manufacturing capability to China. It was the United States that did that. Chinese didn't do anything. They took advantage of the situation, obviously. They didn't make America do that. And so in return for doing that, thousands of American communities were destroyed. Millions of jobs just disappeared. Whole communities completely destroyed because of this free trade thing. And it's much like the same way with this American imperialism. Why should America be top dog? Are you worried that China is going to take over the world? Well, if you're worried that China is going to take over the world, maybe you shouldn't have given China all our manufacturing and production capability over the past few decades. When is anybody who did that, who's responsible for that, going to be held accountable? America will be fine. It just needs to get back on its feet again. It needs to be self-sustainable, which it is perfectly capable of being. It was like that for decades before it was gutted. And it will be fine. It will absolutely be fine. So all this fear-mongering, by all sorts of types, I don't think it's, Douglas Murray says it's typically people on the right who don't want America to give up its preeminent place in the world, on the world stage. Well, I think that ship has sailed. It's going to have to give up its place.
In recent months, I think one of the interesting things about anti-Semitism, and I do think the criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, because I think it comes down to the thing of not just double but triple standards. I think, as I say again, if this wild lack of empathy for the state of Israel means anything, you've got to come back to this primordial triple standard. And we know it can come from anywhere, and that anti-Semitism is a shape-shifting virus, can come from left or right, can come from everywhere at the same time. I think the one of the things that's interesting about the movement of some people on the right against Israel, and playing around with anti-Semitic tropes for sure.
Yeah, being against Israel is not the same as being anti-Semitic, and this whole description of anti-Semitism, as he said, as a shape-shifting virus. Yeah, maybe there's a reason for a lot of this anti-Semitism. Maybe, just maybe, there's a reason for that. If people keep having problems with you, if you keep finding yourself getting thrown out of pubs, you want to go out for a drink, and every time you go out for a drink, you go to a different pub and you keep getting kicked out. Maybe the problem is you. Maybe, just maybe, but of course it's anti-Semitic to even say that.
In a way which you could predict but maybe not expect, is that they seem to think that there's something strange. I get this a bit against myself and my, preoccupation with this issue in the last year. I mean, going back many years, but particularly in the last year. And people say, well, why are you so bothered about Israel? And I hear that from the right. The left don't care. They know I'm beyond the saving. But on the right, I hear that. And I think they don't realize, they think it's some weird thing. Like, what is this small state? Why does it bother you? I don't think they've even remotely reflected on what I regard as the deepest reasons to care. It seems to me, if, as you well know, Western civilization is based on the legacy of Athens and Jerusalem. Athens is under great assault always, but it's not actually under existential assault at the moment. What is being attempted by Israel's enemies is the philosophical and cultural equivalent of burning all the libraries of Alexandria.
Yeah, I'm going to need a citation on that, Douglas Murray. Again, I have huge respect for Douglas Murray. And I think every people should have a right to, or should have its own homeland and a right to its own homeland. The Jewish people, the Kurds, all sorts of people. Absolutely. But I'm sorry, the modern state of Israel, as it stands today, is, again, as an isolationist, not our problem. Now, Israel has powerful allies, specifically the United States, and has enormous influence in the United States, as we all know. But, I don't think, and I don't want Israel to be wiped off the map. Don't get me wrong here. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's not our problem. So Israel is going to have to learn to get on with its neighbors. And being attacked on October 7th was not some sort of existential threat, despite the way it was described. I think, was it Netanyahu who described it as the equivalent of 200 9/11s or something ridiculous, in per capita terms, or some idiotic thing like that. No, it was not any kind of existential threat. So I'm sure we'll be learning more about the truth about what happened on October 7th, but and the truth about Bibi Netanyahu. But anyway, so again, I want to make it clear that I'm a huge fan of Douglas Murray. He's been fighting the good fight for many years now, but can't agree with him on everything. And I do think American isolationism does work, actually. And no, America, it's not going to be top dog forever, and should accept that and become self-sufficient again. Let me know what you think of all this. I'll probably annoyed some of you, and you'll let me hear in the comments. I've been reading all the comments recently, been replying to quite a few, so I do appreciate you interacting with me that way. It really gives me food for thought, and it gives me things to think about for upcoming videos too. So, and don't forget to like and subscribe while you're at it. It really helps me grow the channel and continue making content for you.